Shalom. Boom, 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 boom. With the help of Hashem, we are learning ERUVIN Daf Chav Gimel. We're going to begin on the Mishnah and Daf Chav Beis, Amid Beis, that will tell us which types of water sources are eligible to have the Pasei B'Ro'is. And really, there are two factors involved: Be'er, Boir, Yachid, and Rabim, as we'll explain when we'll learn the Mishnah. Really, we had the sugya already in the beginning of the Perek and Daf Yutes. We're going to learn on the Mishnah and Daf Chav Gimel rules regarding a karpef. A karpef literally means a field that's enclosed for storage. In other words, large areas that are designated for non-residential purposes. Saying the same in the Lashon of the Gemara, it's an area, it's called Shaloi Hukaf Ledira. So we're going to have really three sections in the Mishnah. Firstly, we're going to be learning about the rules of what needs to happen in a karpef for us to be allowed to carry in it. We're going to learn about the shiur of Beis Osayim, smaller or larger, whether there needs to be some other, at least similar to residential purposes, for us to be allowed to carry in a karpef that's Beis Osayim or smaller. We're going to be learning about the shape of the karpef, whether it's square, whether it needs to be square, which is better, whether rectangular is also okay. We're going to introduce for the first time the concept of bitul reshus when it comes to eruvei chatzeros. So as we keep on mentioning, Shlomo HaMelech made a takana, that if you have various people that live adjacent one to the other, if the ownerships of these different properties are not mamish the same, then you may not carry from one property to the other, with various nuances to that. We already also learned in Masechta Shabbos, Shitas Rabbi Shimon, that limits a bit this takana. But let's speak about the general concept. Now, what happens if you have a group of people, all of them participated in a eruvei chatzeros, which will then allow them to carry from their house into the common area and vice versa, but one member did not do so. So there is a solution known as bitul reshus, a solution that can happen on Shabbos, that the person that did not participate in the Eruv, he can, so to say, nullify his ownership in the common area to everyone else that lives there. He's not being mevatel his ownership, but he's being mevatel his part of ownership in the common area. So he's b'chlal not involved in there. So therefore, all the other people that did make an Eruv Chatzeros, they will be allowed to carry with all the details, as we'll learn out a few daf from now, but we're going to introduce the concept on Daf Chav Gimel. We're going to be speaking about an area that was initially hukaf ledira. So you have an outdoor area, it was encircled it was fenced off for residential purposes, but later the person did something that appears to be mevatel the residential purposes. For example, the person plants a vegetable garden, and as we'll see in the sugya, that planting trees doesn't take away an area's purpose for residential. People can live amongst trees. It's actually very nice. But if you take an area and you fill it up with vegetables, you can't even walk in there, that is mevatel the dira. So the question is going to happen, how much of that karpef area has to be planted with vegetables for it to be mevatel the entire area, for us not to be allowed to carry in any of the area? And on the other hand, how much of that area could be planted with vegetables? And even though that smaller area is going to be called a gina, and thus no longer hukaf ledira, it's not going to prohibit our reshus, our permissibility to carry in the area that's not yet planted, or it's not b'chlal going to be planted, with all the pratim that we'll learn, God willing, on Daf Chav Gimel Amid Beis. With this, let's go to Daf Chav Beis Amid Beis, 4 lines before the bottom of the Amid, starting with the Mishnah. All right. So says the Mishnah, Echad boir harabim. Whether it's a boir is a water pit. It's a pit that doesn't have water coming into it from under the ground, but you gather rainwater or you just put water in there, whether that belongs to the public or a be'er harabim, right, or a well that belongs to the public, or even a be'er that belongs to a yachid. In all of these three cases, this is the shita of Rabbi Akiva of the Tanach here. One is allowed to rely on this heter of these double boards. What's the issue? Again, the issue, as we spoke out a few daf ago, is that being that the heter of pasi birois is only because you have to give your animals water to drink, and if the water is going to dry up, even if it dries up during Shabbos, let's go with this approach, now you no longer may carry there. There is a much higher chance that a boir will dry up versus a be'er. And even by a boir that might dry up, according to Rabbi Akiva, as long as it is harabim, so if it indeed does dry up, one person will remember that right now you can carry in this area, and he'll remind the others. But if Aval boir hayachid, but if it has the downer that it's a boir, there's a higher chance it's going to dry up, and it's only used by one individual. So there, pasei birois will not suffice. Now, of course, you can properly partition it off like any other area, and when you put on real mechitzas, then that becomes a rishus hayachid. There, you have to make a proper mechitza, because then even if the water gets dried up, who cares? You are in a properly partitioned off area. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava Omer. Now Rabbi Akiva is very lenient. True, he does not allow pasei birois for boir hayachid, but he does allow it for all the other three scenarios. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava holds, you need tartel mal yusa, that ein oisim pasen elo lebe'er harabim. It has to be a be'er. A be'er hardly ever will dry out because the water is coming from within the ground. And even that is not enough if it's biyachid, because sometimes it does get dried up. So only a be'er harabim is something that can be, so to say, permitted through the pasei birois. Ulisha'ar, and to all other types of water gatherings, oisin chagura, you have to make a belt, which is tall 10 tvachim. Now, what does Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, that's the machmer, what does he mean with the belt? So Rashi, the last Rashi in the Amid says, chagura hekev shel chavalim. You have to make a partition out of ropes. Now, this is the sugya that we learned on Daf Tezai and Amid Beis. And if you remember that according to some opinions, you can only rely on this substandard mechitza because you don't have the belt going shesi and erev. It's just going in one direction. Only if it is for a shayara, which means you have a group of 3 people or more. And ein chanami, many people say that when Rashi is writing chagura hekav shel chavalim into the words of Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, because don't forget, Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava is saying that even if it's a boir harabim, you still cannot rely on pasei birois. But at least you can rely on the rabbim to make the substandard wall of a chagura. Anyway, so people understand in Shitas Rashi. In other words, Rashi is not saying that you can always make a hekav shel chavalim. You might only be allowed to do so if you have a group of 3 or more. Good. Gemara and Daf Chav Gimel. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yosef. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. You should know that we're machmir halacha ki Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. And again, that says in the Mishnah that it has to be only a well, not a water pit, and only that's used for the public. Only then can you use pasei birois. Statement number 1. Statement number 2. Ve'amar Rabbi Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, loihutru pasei birois, elo lebe'er mayim chayim bovad. Only if it is a well that has in it living waters, which means waters that are coming from a spring, they're coming from within the ground. Now, l'chu'ura, the latter statement and the first statement are repeating the same thing, because once he said that we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, look in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava says, Taka, you have to have both be'er and harabim. Now, I get that from the latter statement, l'chutru pasei birois, he doesn't mention the rabim. So only say the first statement, Says the Gemara, no, we needed to say them both. Because the Ashmeinon had Amar Rabbi Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Mar Shmuel only said Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. One might have misunderstood Pshat in the Mishnah. Hava Mina, that the emphasis of Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava was only the Rabbim. He doesn't want you ever to rely on Pasibirois for a water gathering that is used by a Yachid. But if it is from the Rabbim, then maybe a person would have learned wrong Pshat. That Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava allows you to use the Pasibirois afilu michunasim even for gathered waters, for rain waters, for boil. 1 second. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava in the Mishnah said, look inside the last line in the previous daf. Well, that's because he was speaking to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was speaking about a be'er. Rabbi Akiva allows a be'er the yachid. So therefore, he wanted to go against Rabbi Akiva by saying that by a be'er can be the yachid, has to be the rabbi. But maybe when he used the word be'er, he was not excluding the reshus for you also to using it by a boir harabim. So Kamash Malon the lehute pasibirois el be'er mayim chaim. Now, why couldn't he just say that statement? V'iyashmin be'er mayim chaim. Okay, havamina. There he never spoke about public-private. Havamina that if it is a be'er, loishna the rabbim, loishna the yachid. Kamash Malon that halacha Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava that you need to have the tarta l'mal yusa, which is a very chomerdik opinion, and only there where there's a very little chance the water will dry up. And if it does dry up, at least many people are using it, so one will remind the other if the other will forget that now that it's dry, you cannot use it. And only then can you rely on the pasibirois. Okay, we're starting the new Mishnah. This Mishnah will break down into 3 parts, and let's really keep them separated, not to confuse one part with the other. The first part of the Mishnah is speaking about a karpeif. This is the source, the ground zero. Again, karpeif literally means a field that's enclosed for storage. And we're speaking about an outdoor large area that's designated for non-residential purposes. Now, when you say the word residential, every person has a different thing in their minds. As we'll learn little details in the Mishnah and in the Gemara, so the concept of hukaf lidira versus shaloi hukaf lidira will become more clarified. Like one example, anything that's for animal use is called lidira because people live with animals. People have animals with them. Planting an area, surrounding a planted area that is an orchard is still called lidira. Planting a vegetable patch is not called ladira. Once you start learning these nuances, the concept of ladira becomes more clear. Now, midoi raisa, my friends, any area that has halachic mechitzas, the mechitzas are 10 tvachim tall, and it's at least 4 by 4, like we keep on learning, that's called a reshus hayachid. Being that this is an outdoor shaloi hukaf ladira area, so when people speak about karpev, they say that if it is larger than Beis Osayim, the chatzar hamishkan, the total area of the mishkan was 50 amas by 100 amas. 50 amas by 100 amas, or 5,000 square amas, is Beis Osayim, and that's a very important number when it comes to the karpev. Generally, we say, which is the halacha, that if it is that size or less, then you always can still carry as is the din Torah. That Chachamim that said that if it's larger than Beis Osayim, you may not carry midrabanan. Midrabanan, it's like a carmelis. That's it. It's only about the size. That's what people normally remember when they review the din of karpev, and it's not exactly so. Not exactly so. So, Fred, let's start with the first din of the Mishnah. V'oid Amar Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. The word v'oid. True, we had in the last Mishnah the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. Not every time Mishnayos are back to back or near each other and you are repeating the same Tana, do you always say Va'oid? Actually, here in Daf Chav Gimel, the Gemara is going to give us the klalim. When did the Rabbeinu HaKadosh write the word Va'oid? And when, even if he's quoting the same Tana Shita, if it's regarding another din, as here we're going from different dinim, the last Mishnah was about Pasibirois. Now we're speaking about the din in Karpav. Sometimes you won't say the word va'id. Okay, but here we are saying the word and more, and furthermore, says Rabbi ben Bava that Hagina, a garden, a vegetable garden, which is the classical shaloi hukaf ladira, or a karpeif, it doesn't have to be a vegetable garden, One example would be that you have a storage area that you barely go to. It's not in your back lot, which is also not that commonly used, but it's out there in the fields. So here is the shiur. Here is this size. Shehem shivim ama v'shirayim al ayin ama v'shirayim, that are 70 amas and some exactly squared by 70 amas and some 70 l'oirich, 70 l'oirich of the shirayim, as we'll see, is 2/3 of an amma. Now the emes is, if you know math, that's 70 and 2/3 times 70 and 2/3 is a little bit less than the 5,000 square amas, which is the Beis Osayim. And Eina Chanami, that little less will be of significance. But that's generally the same size. But guys, remember that Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba is squaring it. That means actually we'll see clearly that it's a machlokes tanoim whether the din of a carpet is a din of a carpet that if it is not bigger than Beis Osayim, that you could carry in it even midrabanan, is only if it's square or even if it's rectangular. As Taka was the Chatzar HaMishkan, the length was double the width. That's another important detail, but we'll leave that later. So he's saying like this: the first Tana holds that you cannot say, if it's Beis Osayim or less, or 70 amas v'shirayim, 70 amas or less, you can carry. No, there has to be another something about that area that makes it at least similar to a dira. It has to be similar for a residential purpose, which means, first of all, amokafos, goder, gavoyas, or tvachim. If it's taka has proper mechitzes, metaltal and metoicha, however, you need something else. And what's that something else? So Lavachi gives you three options. Either a shoymeda, there has to be a watchman's booth. And a watchman's booth doesn't mean it's for residential purposes at all, because he doesn't live in there. He's only in that little booth to watch the outside field. But at least there's a booth there. It makes it somewhat similar to an area that is for residential, or a beis dira, or any other dwelling home. Just because it has a dira, it doesn't mean it was hukaf lidira, but at least there's a beis dira there. Or number three, it has to be near the city. The Mishnah doesn't say how near. There's a machlokes, whether it means within 2,000 amas, whether within 70 amas, much less. But near a city means that the balabas, since it's so close to where he lives, he goes there more often. So that also makes it more similar to dira. So really, Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, especially Lashitas Rashi, is being machadish here two dinim, and we don't paskin like neither of them. Din number one is that if a karpef is larger than the 70 by 70, even if it's hukaf ledira, you're not allowed to carry there with the Rabbanan. Guys, we don't paskin like this. Imagine, it means any out there large area that has real mechitzas, if it's beyond Beis Osayim, you cannot carry there. It's like a caramelis. Even if it is Beis Osayim or less, and again, let's be medayik, 70 v'shirayim times 70 and shirayim, it's 4,994 square amas or less. Even in there, you have to have one of the three shemeda, beis dira, or smucha la'ir for you to be allowed to carry. Like in last Mishnah, in this Mishnah, he's very machmer. Now, the next shita, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, you also have to have something in this area, something, but it doesn't have to be a shemeda or a beis dira smucha la'ir. Afilu ein ba ela boir. Even if there's only a water hole, not a be'er, a boir, or if there's only a shiach, some sort of ditch, or a ma'ara, a cave, that in itself makes it theoretically minimally suited for dwelling. So since potentially there's some infrastructure in there that will allow someone to dwell there, even though it was shaloi hukaf ladina, since it's not larger than Beis Osayim, metaltal lemetoicha. But you see, even Rabbi Yehuda says there has to be something in there. Just because it's not larger than Beis Osayim per se, doesn't mean that you're off the hook with the Rabbanan. Rabbi Akiva is the one that says, no, afilu ein ba'achas mikol elu, metaltal lemetoicha. All you need is the size. As long as it's not larger than 70 by 70, then you can carry in the karpef. Don't forget, guys, that the midrash you can always carry in any area that has mechitzas that are gavoyas yutvachim, halachic mechitzas, and the area is more than 4 by 4. However, ubulvad, The only key emphasis of Rabbi Akiva is Sheyeh Ba Shivim Ama V'Shirayim Al Shivim Ama V'Shirayim. Now we'll see in the Gemara the diuk is really twofold. Number one is that he doesn't say base sosayim. He says 70 and shirayim times 70 v'shirayim, which is a little bit lower. It's a little bit less than the base sosayim. And number two is that Rabbi Akiva needs for that area to be a square. Okay, guys, that ends the first part of the Mishnah. Three-way machlokes tanoim regarding karpef. In what karpef could you carry and what karpef can you not carry? And the way we spoke out that the first opinion in the Mishnah is so machmer. L'shitas Rashi. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava holds that if it's larger than the shiur of 70 by 70 v'sharayim, then even if it is hukaf ledira, you're not allowed to carry there. Now we're going to learn the second part of the Mishnah. Second part of the Mishnah, right, is speaking about the shape. Now we're going to focus on the shape. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Rabbi Eliezer, he's not going into the first machlokes in the Mishnah, whether it has to be some sort of shemeda in there, potentially fit for residential or not at all, but he's going to focus only on the shape. I don't agree with Rabbi Akiva. It doesn't have to be square. It can be rectangular. It can be rectangular, but it cannot be more rectangular than the Chatzar Mishkan, which is the source of this whole base society. So in the Mishkan, it was 50 width by 100 length, which is double length was double the width. You can have it, you can have that. But if it's a little bit longer, even only by 1 amma, then you're not good. Rabbi Yossi Omer, afilu. I'm sorry, take all that back. Rabbi Eliezer says, you have to, Taka has to be square, has to be perfectly square. You can't even have the oirach 1 amma longer than the reichav. Rabbi Yossi says, afilu orka pishnayim berachva mitaltal metoicha. I just want to say that I made a mistake, but the Gemara is going to go back and we're going to learn pshat in Rabbi Eliezer the way I made my mistake. But when you read the words of the Mishnah, sounds like Rabbi Eliezer is saying it has to be square, and Rabbi Yossi is the one that says that you allow it to be double, but not 1 amma more, not 1 amma more than double.
Rabbi, what happens if it's round? Like if you have a round property, what do they say about that? How does that fit in here?
Same concept. In other words, round and square is good because the diameter, either width or length, is exactly the same. And if you allow it to be rectangular, so it has to follow this type of formula of the length cannot be double, it cannot be more than double the width. Same thing can be in round. Now, where do we get all of this from? I'm going to stop in a moment and let's look inside the third Tosfos. Shu'ayin amma v'shirayim. This is really the words of Rabbi Akiva. The words of Rabbi Akiva. So we Chatzar Mishkan. So ask Tosfos, why are we using the Chatzar Mishkan as the prototype? That if it's larger than Chatzar Mishkan, midrabanan, such a large area, if it was Shalohu Kaf Ladira is not good. Why don't we learn from the Beis HaMikdash? Learn from Harabayis or from the Ezras Nashim, and it gives us the dimensions, which is either 135 amma or you have 187 amma, not one, right? So the Yesh Leimar, the whole Mila the Shabbos Mishkan Gamrin. And furthermore, says Tosfos, Inami, that the Azoros in the Beis HaMikdash are not considered not hukaf ledira. All these nuances will help us understand this concept of hukaf ledira. Why? The fact that they were shoymrim, if you have a place that's being guarded the whole time, that makes it into a hukaf ledira. And everyone asks on Tosfos, are you kidding me? What, the Mishkan had no shoymrim? The Torah, speaking about the Levium, the Torah writes explicitly that the Levium in the Mishkan, some of them did the shoyarim, some of them were the shoyarim, some of them were the shoyarim. They stood guard. Shoymrim mishmeres hakodesh. So there's many answers to that. One of which is that the shoymrim in the Mishkan had no fixed place. That's not called hukaf ledira. In the Beis HaMikdash, there were actually, as we learned in Talmud and in Midrash, there were physical booths, and even if not, there were exact corners which was designated for the Shominim, that makes it Hukaf Ladira. Masha Enkin in the Mishkan, where there was no such designated places. Okay, back inside the Mishnah. So we had a three-way machlokes regarding what else does the karpef needs to have, if anything, for you to be allowed to carry, even if it's smaller, even if it's not bigger than Beis Hosayim. Then we have a machlokes regarding, does it have to be square? Can it be rectangular? And how rectangular? And now we have the third part of the Mishnah, which is 3 dinim. Amar Rabbi Elyahu, which is a Tana. I heard from Rabbi Eliezer, so amends the Mesoidas Hashas. 3 laws, and they're not all about karpef. Number 1 is regarding karpef, vafilu hi kebeis kur. This rule that carrying is permitted, and let's go with Shitas Rabbi Akiva, that if it is in the smaller shiur, in the smaller size, you don't need anything if it, other than mechitzas, always right to 70 by 70 or Beis Hosayim. He says no. He says you can carry in a karpef even if it has the size of a base kur. Now, guys, a kur is 30 sa. So Hosayim is 2 sa. So he allows a karpef. He allows you to carry in a karpef even if it is 15 times bigger. That's huge. Not double, not triple. 15 times bigger than everyone else. That's leniency number 1. And I heard leniency number 2. Shomati mimeni, I heard from Rabbi Eliezer that Anshe Chatzar sheshakach echem mehem v'lo yeirav, that if you have bnei Chatzar and Takana Shlema HaMelech, each one participated in a ERUVIN Chatzeres, but one did not. So there, the solution will be what we mentioned in the words of introduction, Bitul Rishus, which makes so much sense. Again, we're going to learn this more in Daf Chavav. We're going to go into the details there. But we want for everyone to be at least Shabbos, a partner in everyone else's Rishus. One person did not participate in the food of the Eruv. He's not partnering with anyone. So his ownership in the common area should asset it. If he's mevatel that, it's no longer his. And he can do Bitul Rishus on Shabbos. It's not that the other people have to acquire it, is that he does not own it anymore. So there's no other person here. Everyone has equal ownership in everything. So in such a case, he had the following detail, that even though that person himself, it's forbidden to him, right, to take objects between his house and into the chutzner because the house is only his. The chutzner is b'chlal not his, but Rabbi Eliezer has a leniency that we're going to speak out a lot more in Daf Chavav, that they may take articles from their domain into the chutzner and from the chutzner into his house. Wow. And again, we're going to leave that for later. And then number 3, again, not related at all, not only not related to Karpef, but not related to Hilchas Shabbos. Now we're going to Hilchas Pesach, to the din of Mother. That what type of vegetable do we have to eat from Mother? We're going to learn these dinim together. So we know what the minig is today, but we have many options. So he added sheyotzim, that you can be yotzim, the mitzvah of Mother, ba'ar kablin. Ar kablin is some sort of creeping vine that grows around the date palm. It has a bitter taste. That's also good enough for Mother. Now, all of these 3 were big leniencies. So says Rabbi Elyahu, v'chazarti al kol talmidov, I went later to ask any other of Talmidei Rabbi Eliezer, uvichashti li chaver, to find if anyone else remembers the Rebbe, Rabbi Eliezer saying it, but v'loi motzasi, no one remembered that. Rashi says, uvichashti li chaver l'shloisha devarim halalu, im shamam b'fiv, and v'loi motzasi. And we'll see more on Rabbi Elyahu, God willing, in the Sugya in the Gemara. Okay, so before we even begin the first part of the Mishnah began with the words va'oid. Now that can make sense because last Mishnah had a din of Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava regarding the pasibirois. The first time in our Mishnah again is his very stringent din of karpef. Yosim beis Hosayim b'chlal you can't carry, even if hukaf ladira. Less than beis Hosayim, you have to have one of the 3 conditions. But my Tana, the Tani va'oid, why is Rabbeinu HaKadosh writing the words va'oid? Is it simply because Bishum the Tana le chada l'chumra? Because in the previous Mishnah we quoted Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava that said the more chamra pingam apasi v'rois, and now Viktani achrite, and now we're quoting the same Tana, is sharing his sheet, or Rabbeinu HaKadosh is recording his chumradik opinion. So that's why Mishumachik Tani Va'oid says the Gemara, that won't work. That in itself, L'chud, is not the right answer. Why not? Rabbi Yehuda, the Tana Rabbi Yehuda, the Tani Leichad L'chumra, that we had a Shita L'chumra. What are we referring to? So we can look inside the Rashi, where this is referring to the first Mishnah in our Perek, when it comes to how wide can you broaden the Pasei B'Rois. Remember that? The Tanakh said, as wide as you want. Elamah, you have to add additional boards. There, Rabbi Yehuda was Machmir, and he said, right, the Ad Beisosayim in Tefilla. And then the next Mishnah in this Perek, we had another Machlokes in which Rabbi Yehuda opines that if a road goes through the area of the Pasei B'Rois, since Rabbi Yehuda holds that yes, Asarabim umavatla mechitzis, Yisal kenu l'tzdadim. So we have two Mishnayos back to back. Each one quotes a chumrah of Rabbi Yehuda, but when Rabbeinu HaKadosh quotes Rabbi Yehuda in the second Mishnah, he doesn't say that oid amar Rabbi Yehuda. V'ktani yachita v'liktani v'oid. So the Gemara says, no, that's not a kasha, because Hassan afsiku arabanan. Because in the first Mishnah, after Rabbi Yehuda says that the Pasei B'Rois are limited, you can't spread them out beyond Beis Osayim around the water boil. The Chachamim, the Mishnah says now Amrulai, no, Beis Osayim is only regarding a carpet, but Pasei B'Rois is a bona fide mechitza. So in other words, it's not Rabbi Yehuda. There was the Chachamim in between. And over here, Lo Yafsiku Rabbanan, right, the end of the Chav Beis Amud Beis, the last shita. The Rabbi Akiva is not the last shita. Rabbi Akiva was the first one. The last one is Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. So maybe that's why you write va'oid when there's no other Tana in between. That also doesn't work. Why not? Now we don't have that kasher from a Sechta Shab for ERUVIN. We have the kasher from a Sechta Sukkah because for Chaleicha daf Sikur Abanan like Tani va'oid. Look at this. Rabbi Eliezer, which is quoted in Sukkah. And like guys, quickly look inside the Rashi, the last narrow line in the Rashi, that Sukkah daf Chav Zayin. Rabbi Eliezer says there that you have to eat 14 Su'udas over the 7 days of Sukkot. And the Chachamim say, no, there's no such limit. Then it says, V'oid Amar Rabbi Eliezer, another din. Whoever did not eat the meal of Yom Tiv, that means the first night going into Sukkot, can make it up by having a meal on the Shmini Atzeres. As we'll learn all these dinim in Masechta Sukkah. So it's Rabbi Eliezer, Chachamim, Afsikur Rabbanan, then another din of Rabbi Eliezer, and Rabbeinu HaKadosh introduces that second din about compensating a meal, not Amar Rabbi Eliezer, V'oid Amar Rabbi Eliezer. Back inside the Gemara now. That V'hor Rabbi Eliezer de Sukkah, the Afsikur Rabbanan, yet it says V'oid. So the Gemara says like this. This is the klal. Over there, even though Rabbi Eliezer, Chachamim and Rabbi Eliezer, however, the second din of Rabbi Eliezer about compensating meals is speaking about the same topic of the first sheet of Rabbi Eliezer, which is about how many meals. So it's b'milsei. It's speaking about the same general sugya. If it is b'milsei, Hassan b'milsehu the afsikua. So true, Rabbi Eliezer and Chachamim, but then you go to Rabbi Eliezer regarding the same general sugya we say va'oid. Over here meaning Rabbi Yehuda. What was Rabbi Yehuda? Rabbi Yehuda was about the size of Pasei B'Rois, right? B'milsa achrita afsikua Pasei B'Rois and the din of Asir Rabim umavatla mechitzta are two different dinim. The emphasis it's not only a din on Pasei B'Rois. It's not about how many meals, compensating meals. It's the area of Pasei B'Rois and what does a rabbim do to mechitzas. So since it's not the same sugya and Rabbi Yehuda, Chachamim Rabbi Yehuda, that's why Rabbeinu HaKadosh did not write the words va'oid. Over here, true that Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava in the first Mishnah today spoke about the dinim of Pasei B'Rois. Rabbi Yehuda in Daf Chav Gimel is speaking about din karpet. It's different dinim, but there's no chachamim in between. So here we learn that there's two rules. If it's in the same sugya, if it's about the same general sugya, it doesn't bother me if there is a second Tana or chachamim that are being mafsik. You write va'oid like we do in Sukkah. Here, another din, that if you have back-to-back the same Tana, even if it's about different topics, since there is no other shita written in between, you also write, Rabbeinu HaKadosh would write, as he does here, V'oid Amar, here Rabbi Yehuda ben Bav. Okay, so now let's dig into the first topic of the Mishnah, that we have three-way machlokas tanoim. Even if the karpef is not beyond Beis Osayim, does it need anything else other than the mechitzas? Only Rabbi Akiva was the one that says that afilu einba echad mikol elu, since it's like Rabbi Akiva says, it's 70 by shirayim and 70 v'shirayim. There, it's good enough. Metal Daf Chav Gimel Amud Beis. And now, as we just mentioned, the first Mishnah in the Perek, let's look about something else that we mentioned in the Perek. When Rabbi Yehuda, we just quoted, when Rabbi Yehuda says that pasibirois are limited, you have to leave the area of Beis Osayim and not more. Amru loy, I'm going to Daf Yud Ches. The Chachamim tell Rabbi Yehuda that we only have the din of Beis Osayim when it comes to a karpef. That if it's Beis Osayim or less, you could carry. If it's more, you cannot. But don't bring it, don't connect it to pasibirois. That was the Chachamim. So it sounds like the Chachamim that argued with Rabbi Yehuda in the first Mishnah, Daf Yud Ches, and Rabbi Akiva seem to be saying the same thing. And if it's not beyond the 70 and some, or not beyond Beis Osayim, if it's less than that, then you're good without anything else. Are they the same shita? Says the Gemara, no, they're not. The concept that you don't need something else to make the Beis Osayim or less similar to residential, they're both the same. You need nothing. But what is the limit? There is a small nafkamina. What's the small nafkamina? The Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Davar Muat Yesh Al Shivim Ama V'Shirayim. That there is a difference. There is a small difference between Beis Osayim. Beis Osayim is 5,000 square amas because it's 100 amas by 50 amas. That's 5,000 square amas. 70 V'Shirayim, which is 2/3, times 70 V'Shirayim, you'll see is 4,994. So Rabbi Akiva is a little bit more machmer than the Tanakama by not even allowing you to get to the Beis Osayim. You can only get to the 70 by 70. Now, Vikama. Now, how much is the Beis Osayim? How much is the larger shiur? Shiur Sosayim kechatzara mishkan. Rabbi Akiva said 70 times 70. Now, if the general shiur is coming from the chatzara mishkan, then why would anyone argue with Rabbi Yossi, as we have him, that it can be rectangular? If we're learning this area, that if it's within that area, it's good enough, you leave the Rabbanan, leave the Dairaisa Halacha, then why square? So that's the Minna Hanamili. Now, as we'll see in a moment, the pasuk that we will bring is only an asmachta. But where would we get the concept of it has to be squared off? If it's rectangular, it makes also sense. It looks very long. It's too big already. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Kra. Guys, we're going to the end of Parshas Truma. This is so geschmack for people, especially people in Chitas, people who are Balkaitas. Every year we read this pasuk, and now we're going to chap what the Torah is being meramas to. This is again an asmachta. It says, Oirech HaChatzer Meya Ba'ama. Listen to the Lashon HaKodesh. Oirech HaChatzer Meya Ba'ama. Roichev, what would you say? Chamishim. If Oirech is Meya, Roichev is Chamishim. You know what it says in the Chumash? It says Roichev Chamishim Ba'Chamishim. Mamish doesn't fit. And now the truth is that if you have, let's say, guys, if this would be the Oirech and the Roichev. If it's Oirech Meya and the Roichev is Chamishim, well, Ba'Chamishim, you can put an imaginary line in the middle, which you could, then you'll have 50 by 50. But why would the Torah add that word? What's the B'Chamishim? So that's, guys, this is an asmachta. So that's as a hint, Amr Torah, that when it comes to the din of a karpef, don't allow a rectangular. Don't allow an area of 100 by 50. You may not carry there midrabanan. Because it's shloihu kafladira. Like the chatzara mishkan is not considered to kafladira. Elama, you take the 50, there's 50, the bottom 50. You take the top 50 and you equally spread all of that space, half of that on the oirech, half of that of the roichev, so you make it into a larger square. And if you'll do the math, it's not 75. It's 70 v'shirayim on 70 v'shirayim. and then you come to almost the same amount of the 5,000 square amas, you come to 4,994. That Amr try to 12 chamishim, take the rectangular 50 that's going beyond the box, the sabev chamishim, and square it on the first 50. And that is an asmachta to those who hold that a karpef has to be square. Okay, now that you pointed out that word bachamishim is extra, and don't forget, guys, the whole din of karpef is a din d'Rabbanan. The whole din of karpef. So obviously, this is an asmachta. So what's the pshat on the pasuk? You know, you look at a pasuk. What did Hashem mean? So it means that when you enter the Chatzar Mishkan in the first 50 leave completely empty. So the Azara, so to say, was 50 by 50 completely empty. The entire Mishkan, let's use the word structure, and the dimensions, the inner dimensions of the Mishkan structure was 30, because the Kodesh was 20, the Kachin was 10, 30 by 10. That was placed fully in the deeper 50. So Chamishim b'Chamishim, divided into two halves. Hamed Mishkan al Sfas Chamishim, begin the Mishkan once you fully left the first 50. If you'll see a picture, it's very clear. And when you do so, what happens is that on the ladder, on the deeper 50 amas in which you place the Mishkan, if you place it on the edge, so if you have 50, the Mishkan, we said, takes up 30. So how much empty space will you have behind it? 20. The width is 50. The inner dimensions of the Mishkan is 10. How much do you have left now? 40. Again, 20 on each side. It's not exactly because we're going into the inner dimensions to the outer dimensions. The thickness was an amma. So it's really going to be 19, but there's a certain beautiful symmetry. The first half is completely squared, 50 by 50. The latter half, once you place the Mishkan at the beginning of the latter half, the open space around the Mishkan will be equal in each direction. 20, 20, 20. Be'em is 19, 20, and 19, but it's very close. So here we see a certain type of squareness, which means a symmetry. It's not longer than wider. It's the same. Okay, a square, a circle. As we mentioned, and Danny brought out, just to know that the circle is infinity, and the whole idea of the Mishkan is that the koyach or ein soif, or godliness that's ein soif, represented sometimes by a circle, is coming down as being shoichen in this oilam hazard, represented by limits, represented by a square. Okay. Rabbi Eliezer, I know I made a mistake when I learned the Mishnah, but we'll see that that's really what Rabbi Eliezer meant. Sounds like he's saying it has to be square. And Rabbi Yossi is saying it can be rectangular. So says the Gemara, look in the Braisa, v'hatanya Rabbi Eliezer oimer, im hoisa orcha yeser al pi shnayim berach, b'afil b'ama achas, im etal l'motech. In the Braisa, Rabbi Eliezer says what Rabbi Yossi is saying. Mamish, he's saying it can be a rectangular, not like Rabbi Akiva. If not, he's saying like Rabbi Akiva. No, Elama, it cannot be more rectangular than the Chatzar Mishkan. It can be 50 by 100, but not one amma more rectangular, even if you're losing space on the width. So l'chayra, what is he saying? So Amarav Bibi Barabaya and Chanami. That's the way you got to learn the Mishnah. Ki Tana Name Masni Son. What he meant in the Mishnah was you can have it rectangular. It can be an amma more than Pishnayim Berachba. The length cannot be more than double. That's what the Mishnah says. The problem will be that's mamish what Rabbi Yossi is saying. Rabbi Yossi. So now says the Gemara Iki Benayu Ribua Di Ribua Darabanan. In other words, the nafkamina will be. Do the Chachamim lechatchila recommend for you to make a box, a ribua, or lechatchila can you make a rectangular? Rabbi Yossi holds, not like Rabbi Akiva, that it has to be square. It could be rectangular, could be, but if someone were to ask, I want to make a karpef, and I want to be allowed to carry out there in my field, the Rav should tell him, make a square. Make a square. Rabbi Eliezer is so lenient, as we see later in the Mishnah from Rabbi Loi. He has larger shiurim. You don't even have to lechatchila make it into a square. You can lechatchila make it into a rectangle. Okay. And Rabbi Yossi said, okay, Rabbi Yossi Omer, a rectangular is good. Now, let's see how far we'll get. We're going to learn the following. Itmar was stated. Rabbi Yossi, Omer Choli Itmar. Amar Rabbi Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Firstly, the halach is like Rabbi Yossi. At least it could be a rectangular. Okay. Halama, the oirich cannot be more than double the reich. But Rav Bibi, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, another leniency that halacha Rabbi Akiva, he means, Rabbi Akiva mentioned 70 by 70. Halacha Rabbi Akiva, unlike the first two Tanaim in the Mishnah, that say that even if the karpav is not more than the Beis Osayim, even if it's less than that, there has to be some other similarity to residential purposes for you to be allowed to carry. Rabbi Akiva says no, that if it's not beyond the maximum shiur, 70 by 70 or Beis Osayim, then you don't need anything else. In other words, v'tarvayu l'kula, we're very lenient, and v'tzricha, just because we paskin like one, it wouldn't necessarily mean we paskin like the other. Okay, it can be a rectangular, but you have to have something else in there other than just it not being larger. You need nothing else. It doesn't go beyond the shiur, you're good. If he only would have said Rabbi Akiva, I would have thought the arich v'katan loy. Rabbi Akiva said a square. Rabbi Akiva said 70 v'sharayim on 70 v'sharayim. Kumash v'lo paskin like Rabbi Yossi. Now, guys, we're starting here to quote a brayso. Karpeif es haltkop. Shuhu yosim beis osayim. Now, if it's larger than beis osayim, but shuhu kaf ledira initially, unlike the first time in the Mishnah, unlike Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, now that we paskin like Rabbi Akiva, now that we paskin like Rabbi Yossi, we're paskin leniently. If it's hukaf ledira, I don't care how large of an area it has halachic mechitzes, you are allowed to carry, but that was only the initial designation. But now you did an action that's mevatel your initial designation. So what would be that action? A vegetable garden is considered by default an area for non-residential purposes. And I just explained, when you plant trees, there's areas in between the trees. People can still live there. Actually, some people dafka plant trees around their home. It gives you shade, it gives you fruit. A vegetable patch, whoever knows, it takes up all the space. You can't even walk there. And now you went ahead and nizra. So guys, listen to the words of the brayso. These are to be medayik. If the roiv of that area was planted with vegetables, so now that action is mevatel do hukaf ledira. So now we say that all of it has a din of agina. All of it has a din of agina. You not only may not carry in the vegetable patch itself, but in the other minority area, the minority area is bottled to the majority area. Now it's considered a one location, shaloi hukaf ledira, and you can't carry in any of it midraban. However, says the brayso, nita rubai, but if you planted even in the roiv trees, so what? So what? You lachatchila was hukaf ledira. Now you planted trees, so hareika chaser, and it remains muter. Okay, end of brayso. Now let's be medayek first from the reisha of nizra rubai, and then tomorrow we'll be medayek from the seifa of nita rubai. Nizra rubai. So there is a diuk. Now we're going to have three ways of understanding the following diuk. Here are the words. When do we say that? What, guys? Look inside the Rashi. This is important. 7 lines from the bottom of the Amid, all the way to the bottom. The big Rashi is Elo sheyesh ba'oisa makim zriya yoitzim beis osayim, that you planted. Let's make believe, guys, that you have an area that's a total of 5 beisa, not to 5. So if you divide it into roiv and miut, it's 3 versus 2. So when you planted in that place, it was in the 3. Why is that? And therefore, says Rashi, now that 3 beisa of that area becomes a karmelis because you ruined its original designation, or you're a mevatalit. Why? Because the karpa, the Israel Meisosayim, shaluk aladir karmelis have. And 1 second. And how large is the other area? Beisosayim. But why can't you carry in that area? So he explains, you know why? Even though that area is only 2 saw, but it's fully opened to the Gina. And we learn a rule that if I am in one Rishus HaYachid, and I'm opened up into another Rishus HaYachid, Shenifratz, right? Rubai, Shenifratz kulai. If I cannot carry in there, I cannot carry in here. Let's keep on reading inside the Rashi. But the key is that the area that I planted a vegetable garden is an area that's larger than 2 saw, which is why you may not carry in there. This will appreciate in a moment why this is so important. Back inside the Gemara, but guys, keep your finger in the Rashi. We're 5 lines before the bottom of it. Keep one finger in here, and let's go back in the Gemara. Avol beisosayim mutar. Look inside the Rashi. Avol beisosayim. If the area in which you planted the gina was only 2 saw or less, the belav dida shari be'ampeinamshe. We just paskin like Rabbi Akiva. Okay, it's a vegetable patch. But if that part of this area is beisosayim or less, and therefore you are allowed to carry in there. So says Rav Huna, Hachinami Shari, you will be allowed to carry in this area as well. Now hold on, guys. The sum total is more than 2 Beisah. But we will consider these 2 areas 2 different names. One is called the Gina, which is a vegetable garden, and the other area that has nothing planted is going to be called a Chatzar. Now, when you have a gina and a chatzar, 2 different reshuyasin, can you carry from one to the other? Really, this goes into a machloikes that we learned already in Masechta Shabbos. Shitas Rab Shimon is that even though Shlomo HaMelech says that you cannot carry from one Rosh Hashanah to the other, you have to make different Eruv Chatzeres, that's only from a house to a chatzar, from a house into a garden, from a house into a karpef. But between a chatzir and a gag and a karpef and a muksa, all other types of relatively open reshuyas hayachid, you are allowed to carry from one to the other. So if the gina is in itself, if you judge it by itself, if it has a status of beisosayim or less, so what that you are mavatel dira, it's not bigger than beisosayim. We paskin like Rabbi Akiva, you can carry, you don't need anything else. Even though the adjacent now chatzit is open to it nifratz b'malayoi, but according to Rab Shimon, look inside the Gemara, according to Rab Shimon, from a chatzit to a karpef, you're allowed to carry. And therefore the deal that he added was that the rubai has to be more than beisosayim. And then it will fit. According to Rab Shimon, the Tanan, we're going to have this in Daf Peites. Rab Shimon Omer, Echad Gagois, the Echad Chatzeres, the Echad Kapifos are all considered Rishus Achaseim, Lekelim, Shushav Shabbataycham. You are allowed to carry without any Eruv Chatzeres. As long as the Keli did not originate in a house, you can carry from one location to the other. So is the first understanding of Rav Huna ben Rabbi Yeshua. Asks the Gemara, hold on, it does not work. Even if you're going to say that this Braisa follows Rab Shimon. Still, Nami, Kivan the Nizra Rubai, here's the problem. Problem is that you are allowing yourself to consider the vegetable patch as a gina, and then the other smaller area as a chatzir. Neither area per se is more than beisosayim. What would be the only issue? It's nifratz b'maloyoi. Who cares? From a gina to a chatzir, and from a chatzir to a gina, you don't need an eruv. Problem is, we're not allowed to view it that way. You know why? Because kivan the nizra rubai, once the majority is a gina, havahahu, the other part of this original area is the minority, daf chav dalid. And here is a klal. The klal is batil lei legaberuba, which means that the majority portion, the raiv, which is always considered primary, it determines the status of the whole area. So even if the gina by itself is not more than beisosayim, it's open the maloyoi to the other non-planted area, the original area that was hukaf ladira. They're open one to the other. The sum total area is more than 2 saw. We're not allowed to say, it's gina to chatzir. The raiv determines the status for all. In our case, very good. Look inside the picture, whoever has a picture. So the total here is 3 beisah. If 2, even only 2 base, now besos, if there only would have been a beisosayim, not a problem. You're allowed to carry in the beisosayim. But since it's the raiv, it determines the halachic designation or the name of the smaller area. And now you have a sum total of the miyut goes after the roiv. The roiv is shaloyu kavladira. So it's all considered shaloyu kavladira. Now you have more than beis osayim, and it should remain also. So that's for sure not what Rav Huna said. So no, that the diuk of Rav Huna was not on the words on the rubai, but it is from the inference from the miyuta. Ha miyuta share, as long as the minority of the sum total area was made into a gina, made into a shaloyu kavladira, then you can carry everywhere. So on that, that's only if the total of the planted area. So now, guys, we're going to be speaking not like the previous picture where the sum total area was 3 saw. We're going to speak about a sum total area of 5 saw, and less than 2 saw, not 2 saw, less than 2 saw is where you have it planted. That's the case of miyuta. That means 3 saw and a bit. 3 saw and a bit is where it's remaining unplanted. And taka, you can carry. Why can you carry? Because it's the roif. An area, the area that's not even 2 saws, not chashuv, it's bottled, it's nullified to the larger area. The larger area, as you can see in the picture, remains hukaf ladira. So it's considered all hukaf ladira. And therefore, not only can you carry in the unplanted area, but adarabba, because of this concept that the miyut is bottled and the miyut has to be a little bit less than 2 saw, so it has no chashivus, it's all considered hukaf ladira, you can carry everywhere. Abel, his diuk was fakir if you planted beis osayim, the whole beis osayim, even though it's the minority of the sum total area. But but a beis osayim, since it is that shiur, that won't be bottled. That has a designation of its own. Now hold on. And therefore what? Fakir. Rav Huna is understanding that the Brais is following Shitas Chachamim, that when you have 2 Reshuyos HaYachids that are under different designations, if they don't have an Eruv, you may not carry into the other. And now you have a Nifretz B'Meloyoi L'Makoim Ha'asr Loi. So therefore, you won't be able to carry anywhere. Abel Beis Osayim Asr everywhere, because Fakir, this Brais will follow the Rabbanon. According to Rav Shimon, you'll be allowed to carry. You'll be allowed to carry in the unplanted area. According to the Chachamim, you can't carry anywhere. That's second. The third approach is a little bit more leniently. That the Rav Yirmiyah Midifti says he learned the same diuk, but more kuladik. It doesn't have to be less than the beis saw. Even if the minority is a full beis saw, full beis osayim, even if the minority is 2 saw, but it's still the minority, then you can carry everywhere. Everywhere means, again, that will go according to Rav Shimon. But at the moment it's more than beis osayim, so now it's going to be usher to carry everywhere. Okay? Why will it be usher to carry everywhere? Because now that you have a karpef, which is bigger than beis osayim, even according to Rav Shimon, you cannot carry in a karpef that's larger than beis osayim. And here, the other larger unplanted area is nifratz b'meloyoi l'makoim ha'asr loi gavaldik. So he learns more kuladik means that it's going to follow Rav Shimon, and yet if the planted area, which is a miyut, is more than 2 saw, then you got yourself a problem. But if the planted area is exactly 2 saw, then you're still good. Why are you still good? Because it's a karpef, takashaloyu kafladira, but it's not larger than a 2 saw. That's a gina adjacent to a chatzar. Nifretz b'meloye, I don't care. You can carry here, you can carry there. According to Rav Shimon, there's no issue that you didn't make an eruv. So come on, Rav Shimon, and the issue will only become if the planted area is larger than 2 saw. So here you have 3 ways of being medayik in the nizra rubai, and God willing, tomorrow we'll continue to learn the brayso of the nita rubai, that if b'chlal is not mavatal, it's not mavatal, the original designation, ubamela, it remains completely mutter everywhere. To be continued.
Chazak u'baruch.
Shkoyach.
Guys, have a great day.
Yeah.
Ah.
Everybody.